About your relationship with Paula. Thank you. This isn't yes, it is a sound check and it's working. Thanks. I wanted to take just a moment before we begin to welcome you to First Unitarian Church of Baltimore. I made a joke last week and said you only turn 203 times. A couple of years ago, we celebrated the bicentennial of the founding of the church. In 2018, we celebrated the 200th anniversary of this building, and then last Sunday, we celebrated the 200th anniversary of the installation of our first minister, at which was preached a very important sermon, Unitarian Christianity, which became fondly known as the Baltimore sermon, and was in its day the most widely disseminated pamphlet in the United States for a decade. I wanted to just say a little bit about the building that you're in. We used to go back a couple hundred years, it actually would look quite different. If you can imagine 4 enormous archways, a circle on top and then a dome going up, which is still up there. You can imagine this building was quite a bit higher than it is now, or this room was quite a bit higher. And in those days, there were no religious symbols in the space. The pendentives in the 4 corners each held a shield, one for unity, one for tolerance, one for fortitude, and one for peace. And you came in to the space under the pediment on which is the angel of truth. And in the dome was a circle of light, and the oculus and light going into the space. And that was the religious sentiment and the religious statement. It was meant to be very open and awesome. In those days, too, the pulpit was high and in the center of the chancel, which in those days curved back. Actually, the curved wall is still beyond that wall. And of course, in our tradition, we don't have a need for an altar. The sacrificial things that we do are the lives that we live. So we didn't have an altar. We had the base for a pulpit. And the pulpit was high. There was a circular staircase on either side. The chairs you see on the side were designed by Godefroy, who designed this building. And they were halfway up, and then behind it all was the settee. And so we see some actual, functioning 19th century antiques in the place. During the 19th century, the room with its great height proved to be an acoustical nightmare. And there were stories about the pernicious doctrine only being heard in the first 4 rows in this place. But, and that may be overstatement by someone who felt we had pernicious doctrine. But we rearranged the chancel every 20 years or so, hung curtains in places, tried to block off sound, actually had an early acoustical engineer create a reflecting dome from behind the speaker. Finally, in the 1890s, it was a time when we were a little flush for some reasons, and we made the decision to lower the ceiling to try to bring the sound in, and we also made the decision to look a little more Christian. And so the Alpha Omega window was added at that point. The Jesus and his friends at dinner was placed. This is a Tiffany mosaic, actually nationally noted, recently shown in an exhibition at the American Glass. Photographs of it, shown in an exhibition at the American Glass Museum in New York. There were stained glass windows put on either side, and what you see are actually not completed, because they imagined that those gold, the little triangles in the center would be removed because somebody would commission a figurative stained glass window. But by the time all of this work was done, the people who were interested in that and the people who had the capacity to do that were no longer interested or no longer had the capacity. And so what we were left with was these beautiful placeholders, which I'm very happy with. Thank you very much. But we knew, too, that the Christian iconography was limiting for us. And so in the 70s, we began trying to picture the religions of the world with the Abrahamic faith on one side and the Asian representations on the other side. In the 80s and into the 90s, there were questions about how male-centered things were. And so the women of the church commissioned these two beautiful quilts, one that represents the interconnected web of existence of which we are a part, and one that represents community, maybe family. And you see our near neighbors in the solar system at the top, and you see the Baltimore city skyline, and you see women arrayed not in the light of the sun, but in the rich, reflected wisdom of the moon. And what's especially beautiful for me is that there's an open space. There's always room for someone to join in. This church also has the distinction of being a place where the HIV and AIDS epidemic was faced head-on when two members and one staff person of this church created HERO. And as a recognition of that commitment to the full inclusion of gay men, lesbians, bisexual, and transgender persons in this community, the pink triangle was added with a rainbow. And then in those years before I got here, we had a marriage equality banner out on the portico. Civil marriage is a civil right. Ironically, we don't mean to offend any Catholics, I promise. But if you went into the prayer garden and you took a photograph of John Paul II playing Jesus as suffer the little children to come unto me, above his head it used to say, civil marriage is a civil right. It just worked out that way. Serendipity. When marriage equality became the law, we took that down. But in the wake of the violence in our city, especially after the death of Freddie Gray, we raised a banner with the Universalist heart and the words Black Lives Matter. We're so glad that you're here. This is meant to be a home of dialogue and transformation. And that sounds like the person that we're honoring today. A life of community building, a life of family creation, a life of dialogue and transformation. We're going to have a beautiful morning with one another. How's that? Let's all take a deep breath. Beloved, here we are gathered for a simple task, but difficult. To know that our mother, our grandmother, friend and sister of us all, Paula and Franklin, is dead. Here we meet, called out of our lives to greet this death, to share our sorrow, to comfort one another, and to listen to the story of a life, a good life, and full. Edward, will you please light the chalice?
This is the mystery we affirm. Each human life is sacred. It is sacred in its being born. It is sacred in its living. It is sacred in its dying. Paula's death calls us together, a blessed community, to bid her farewell, to seek the restoration and healing of this time and place and of each other, to search for life's deepest meanings and to say yes to life and life's greatest expression, love. In the words of the Christian scripture, love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. Paula Franklin moved from this community in July 2009, not quite 10 years ago. I moved into this community in August 2009, just days after her exit. And so I met not Paula, but the effects of Paula. I heard from many voices the love that people have for her, the love of life that she displayed, her generosity and her love of joyful times, and the deep respect that people had for the way she was in this place. I learned that she helped people get organized into areas of interest that were meaningful to them, helping to bring together poets and lovers of poetry to launch our annual Poetry Sunday, now in its 40-something year. I learned that the group she launched for those who wish to study and share their dreams, not the visions for this church, the kind of dreams I talk about, but their actual dreams. The ones they remembered, the ones that recurred, the ones that were elusive. All dreams that allow us to know ourselves and to even share ourselves when we're in a group with one another. To share ourselves. To share ourselves, our interests, our sense of the Spirit, our very lives, and to be brought together to get organized. Paula was an organizer after all. Connector and a builder of relationships. She worked to create our neighborhood caring circles, and the circle in 21218 is our most successful, in part because of the care she brought to building it, including having a very capable co-leader of a younger generation, herself a great relational organizer, all part of the genius of 21218. Paula was building this church, relationship by relationship, just as she had spent a lifetime in pulling together her family. This family that she built will tell us its diverse story today, and the larger family, as she brought all of us in, will have a chance to tell more of the story. You may hear something that rings true in your experience. You may learn something new today, and you may simply find joy in what you hear and how we share. A person experiencing Alzheimer's can have a very difficult time making new relationships. The little things that we remember about each other can get lost. And so building the family, making new friends, which was Paula's long story, became near impossible. However, that was not the end of Paula's story. A loving and attentive family knew that she had friends, old friends, at Broadmead. And so there she could remember the faces of another time, relive the stories of another time, even to dream. My visits with her and the times she was brought to church revealed a light in her eyes that said to me that although she could no longer at the end speak, she knew the place she was. She knew the people with whom she was. She knew them as home. She knew them as family. Places of art, places of joy, places of love, places of poetry. The longest art, die-hard Promethean way, cherishingly to tend and feed and fan that inward fire, whose small precarious flame, kindled or quenched, creates the noble or the ignoble men or women we are, the worlds we live in, and the very fates, our bright or muddy star. Aldous Huxley. We're not in a rush today. We'll take our time, we'll hear some stories. will re-experience Paula. And let's all just take a deep breath. As you're able, will you please rise and join me in singing "'Tis a Gift to Be Simple" from the Gray Hymnal, number 16.
Morning. So I'll be reading an excerpt from the Prophet by Khalil Gibran. And the priests and priestesses said unto him, "Let not the waves of the sea separate us now, and the years you have spent in our midst become a memory. You have walked among us a spirit, and your shadow has been a light upon our faces. Much have we loved you, but speechless was our love, and with veils has it been veiled. Yet now cries aloud unto you, and would stand revealed before you. And ever has it been that love knows not its own depth until the hour of separation." Thank you.
This is from Let's Get Well by Adele Davis. Because we're capable of magnificent positive emotions, I particularly dislike the statement, "we are what we eat." A continuous awareness that we are very much more than what we eat, I believe, is necessary to promote health. Within each of us is an immeasurable capacity for love, understanding, compassion, creativity, joy, and all positive qualities. I feel that the achievement of health is worth considerable effort and expense because it can add happiness to our lives and to others. It can help us to know love and warmth, song, laughter, and music, to experience the joy of creativity and the satisfaction of accomplishments well done, and to have wide interests in this age when exciting advances are being made in every field of human endeavor. It seems to me that health can also bring the oneness of understanding, the silence of meditation and the whisper of prayer, and that it can be ventilated when need be by outbursts of justified anger and bathed now and again with tears. Such health, I believe, is in part a reward of good nutrition. We are indeed much more than what we eat, but what we eat can nevertheless help us to be much more than what we are. Thank you.
I'm going to hear from Paula.
Thank you, everybody, for coming today. May 11th. May 11th was always a very special day in the life of our family. Mother's Day and Sherwood Garden tulips often provided reason to gather. May 11th was also my grandmother's and my father's birthday. While May flowers burst in bloom, we celebrated as a family. When chosen last March, May 11th seemed an appropriate day to celebrate my mother's life. There would be brighter skies, flowers, family, great friends, tradition, love, and life. It would be a fitting day to fill our emptiness with the fullness and brilliance of a life well lived. The best evidence that I was just plain lucky in life is that I was born Paula Franklin's son. However, it was not always easy. Edward can attest, she was a taskmaster. In assigning us chores, she persistently checked behind us to make sure we had done them all well. Her heart seemed cold when she made us go back and vacuum the cat hair under the couch, or wet mop the kitchen floor to ensure shards from the glass we just broke would not find someone's barefoot in the dark. Those early lessons taught us much about doing a job well. She once shared that taking time to teach her children to do things correctly was far more productive over the long run. She never let us off easy by doing something for us. As I look back, what a gift to have someone committed to my becoming competent and confident. Once I reached adulthood, our mother-son relationship blossomed into a great friendship. I recall vividly the joy on her face when after returning from Europe, I announced that I felt confident handling myself in any situation, any place in the world. She was so pleased. We rattled on for a while about self-sufficiency and interdependence, her rationale for teaching me to shop and cook was so I would not be cornered by an unworthy female suitor who gained it up her hand. She prepared me so well for so many days. Mom was not all hard lessons. She loved us intensely, expressed her deep affections until the very end. When Michael, the broad-meat nurse, called with the news, "Your mom has been called home," my first thought was, I wish I could give her one more kiss. I wish I could have one more turn holding her hand. Once more to be the focus of one of her high-beam love stares. Nothing is so pure as a mother's love. She was one of the great problem solvers of all time. When I was in trouble as a kid, she was my defender. When I was low, she provided encouragement, perspective. Her solution was usually something I could do for myself. She offered me glimpses into my future without ever removing my own choice to embrace it for myself. She celebrated my successes, recognized my growth. She admitted her own shortcomings. She allowed me to know her as a person and not just a parental icon. She was a supreme mental coach, building my confidence and convincing me that I was as capable and as worthy as anyone. She understood social reciprocation. She could see life through the other person's eyes. She was an exceptional listener with a line of sight into the depths of my soul, understanding any problem and how it might be resolved. She possessed exceptional empathy and insight. Observing her conversations was like watching pure magic. Winter for Paula. During her years of dementia, I worried if I would recall easily her fullness of being when the time came for this inevitable eulogy. Paula Ann Franklin was a subtle dynamo, Norma Tucker's perfect term for her, who managed to live about 2.5 or 3 lives in her 91 years. How would her story be told? In her decade of living with the fast encroaching darkness of dementia, her spirit continued to shine brightly until the very end. She loved good drama, eating out, being with her family. She attended important events such as graduations and weddings. Some of these trips were macabre versions of Groundhog Day. Maddie and I endured the same round of questions and conversations for what seemed like 250 or 300 times in a trip from State College to Lexington for one of the Wolf Her last trip was Maddie's graduation from her Sinus College on Mother's Day 2 years ago. Oh, Mom was in top form that day. She never lost her deep energy for a good party. Seeing Maddie to adulthood was her last major life mission. Watching Mom at another graduation with the Fords and the Franklins was like seeing a perfect circle. The only female of her grandchildren's generation was launched, symmetry achieved. Her capacity to connect and care, to love and be loved, remained throughout. She held a deep bond and special friendship with her Broadmead nursing assistant, Natalie McGregor. Natalie's sitting right back there, waving to us. What a gift for our family to know Natalie, Allison Warren, and their colleagues were on the job, caringly, professionally offering her dignity through her twilight. Natalie and Mom were more than just that. More than that, though. They were best friends. Mom's passing upset Natalie as much as any of us. Another surrogate daughter, two beautiful souls connected during Mom's winter. I deeply resented her dementia, as you might think. However, I came to appreciate that the essence of her character was revealed in her winter. At the end, she chose to sit at an intersection of two hallways. As Allison shared with us, we'll sure miss seeing those big blues looking at us from her place down that hallway. With nearly all her many talents and abilities gone, she sat at a nursing home crossroads, smiling at the passing staff and residents, radiating warmth and love to all. Even in her winter, Paula Franklin had bounties to share with others, and we all will miss those big blue loving eyes. Paula's fall season. In the autumn of her life, Mom finished a second career and enjoyed an encore career. She earned 2 formal academic degrees, traveled the world with her retired husband and others, as well as being a wonderful grandmother and mother friend to most of us gathered here today. At 70 plus, she completed a second bachelor's with honors from Towson University in art, launching her third career in 2003. Over the next 5 years, hours of practicing and skill building led to 3 full-scale art shows exhibiting her portrait painting and memorial art. Having had 2 full-term babies die shortly after birth, her memorial art practice channeled her own grief into counseling women who had lost children. While working at Social Security's Office of Disability Research, she became frustrated by not receiving a deserved promotion. Now in her early 50s, an inheritance from her mother funded her doctoral degree. Mom had a special way of transforming negative feelings into a positive force. Recognizing the liberty her degree provided, she shifted focus to women held back by not having the means to pay for degrees once in midlife. The small endowment she has established at Towson University provides one example. It will offer scholarship support to modest income mid-career women who need another credential for that next opportunity. Her fall remained full of so many things. She was a prolific photographer, became a distinguished Toastmaster, gave sermons at church, and convened her beloved Green Group. She was a grandmother deluxe who took all her grandkids to Europe. She routinely defined how to mother adult children, never missing an opportunity to bring to town after a grandchild's birth, dads and her cook and butler act, or to babysit toddlers while offering their parents time to date and to become a couple again. She supported Dad's transition from Johns Hopkins into being a poet in so many ways, including building a multimedia slideshow to add background during his poetry readings. She worked out daily, jogging, walking, lifting, doing her Royal Canadian Air Force exercises, eating well until she was 80. It showed. She had presence. She was a role model. She mentored women. She cared for us all. Her 90th birthday is a favorite memory. 20 family and friends were able to gather at Broadmead, and we told her stories. We told stories to her. We told her stories to her about what she had meant to us, helping her remember the brilliance of her own fall season. And she loved every second. So Paula's summer. From 1950 until the early 70s, Mom's central role was homemaker and mother. She read Dr. Spock and tomes about raising healthy children. She applied science and psychology every day in her home. She read Adele Davis, which Todd just did a wonderful job reading, and focused on nutrition long before it was vogue. But oh, what I would have given for a piece of Wonder Bread when I was a kid. Peanut butter and jelly on wheat wasn't really that good at that time. As a mother, she was cool under pressure. So many stories. But Edward recently reminded me of her whistle, which she deployed in many embarrassing places. When she whistled, Edward and I responded. So picture us all at the Honolulu Zoo. It's 1964. Edward is climbing way up and out a palm tree, whose curved trunk extended 25 to 30 feet up and out over some animal's enclosure. Mom and I were preoccupied a short distance away, and we became aware of Edward's gymnastics by the gas of worrying concern from the fast-gathering crowd of onlookers and gawkers. Without even a moment's indecisiveness, Mom starts whistling, which I can't repeat, but Edward made later. Mom starts whistling to Edward, saying in a calm, confident voice, "Time to come down, Edward. Time to come down, Edward." Edward, who could climb anything and later spent 20 years in the big trees as a professional arborist, obediently climbed back down to safety. Neither Mom nor Edward seemed to be at all concerned about the spectacle that had been created. I was mortally embarrassed. However, it demonstrates she was in full control, displaying as she so often did, an ideal combination of assertiveness and restraint as a parent. Her summer also included significant professional partnering with my father. They co-authored a book about their work in West Virginia. Their teaming became the model for my own professional partnership with Nancy. However, none of this occurred in a problem-free enclave, absent of challenge. It included a leading role what my parents characterized before it was stylish as we did not have a family so much as we assembled one. True or not, the dots are connected by Jan's theory that proximity to the first atomic test in Alamogordo, New Mexico, exposed Dick and Grace to poisons that linked the cause of death. For Grace, Paula's two full-term babies, perhaps other miscarriages, and eventually my dad. If you are counting, that is 4 out of 8 nuclear family members who died. And like a phoenix growing out of that bomb crater, my mom became a life force for Dad, Jan, Edward, me, and so many others. Her love and optimism served as the glue, pasting back together pieces of family and people harmed by the echoes of a long-ended war. She helped my father heal. She raised Jan from age 4. She worked to insulate me from the chaos of death. She grounded Edward, adopted at 4, to become whole while he filled the gap left by her 2 lost babies. Paula Spring, the last season for those of you who are counting, born near Chicago, Mom was the daughter of an international businessman, living in Toronto and then London until the Battle of Britain forced her father to send his wife and children out on the last commercial ocean liner leaving Great Britain to take up refuge in Lexington, Virginia. Grandpa stayed with the business in London, and the family was separated for 5 years. She was a handsome woman and told stories of numerous suitors. However, her identity was based far more than a Mad Men post-war view of femininity. She wanted to be known for her mind, her commitment to bettering the world, to her ideals. The book of religious readings, the choices always are, named after the poem Reverend David just recited, provided a spiritual anchor for Mom. And Paula Franklin's life was defined by her choices. She shared with me that during that 1940 ship ride away from the war, whose devastation could have enveloped her, she committed to optimism and giving life. It seems an odd coincidence that her given name was Paula Ann. It is easily turned into Pollyanna, and was by those who were frustrated by her relentless optimism. In her spring, she saw too closely the face of death and war. She chose to live her life dedicated to making the world a better place. The result is that she has touched her family, touched her friends, touched women, touched mothers who also lost their children, touched children who lost their mothers. So when all the seasons of my mother come into focus across time, one idea holds forth. My mother was all about human love. Like spring flowers, she represented love for each of us in a different way. She was a mentor and real or surrogate mother and grandma to so many. For Edward, she was the great mother he deserved, wanted, and cherished. For me, she was life itself. So here on May 11th, as we take stock in the life of Paula Ann Franklin, it is important to remember how very human she was. There was an aspect of Mom's character that felt challenged to feel equal, a feeling common to second children, a feeling common to many women of her generation in the 1950s and 60s that they had to overcome. When I think about my grandmother, I recall being aware of what a monumental presence she was as a grand family matriarch. She was a distinguished, loving lady. As a kid, I knew Grandma to be Mom's role model, and I'll admit, wondering if Mom would ever compare to her mother as she grew older. It was a question for the future, and one for which I had no answer at the time. For all of Mom's many grandma-like attributes, her confident optimism and very British steadfastness in the face of peril, in her spring and summer seasons, I knew Mom to be vulnerable, less measured, less confident, a character in development. So now with the evidence known, let me answer that youthful hypothetical. In the final analysis, Paula Franklin was a woman for all seasons, a Renaissance woman. She was the bright and brilliant flower for so many of us because she shared generously her love, talent, and zest for living. She was marvelously mature and wise and connected. She chose optimism, hope, and the potential for rebirth. She was truly a life force like the best ever seen. Just as Nurse Michael shared so gently with me over the phone this past March 14th, Mom made it home. Paula Ann Franklin lived a life in full. She was beautiful. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you for coming here and sharing this special celebration of my mother, Paula Franklin. By the way, my name is Edward Franklin, and I'm also known as Featherfire. It's a native name that was given to me by a religious touch. Oh, there now. Oh, now. That's right. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Actually, I'm the living proof of one of the many things she believed in. and that was to make sure life got to be lived. And she gave this gift to me freely, and I cherished it as much as I could. The story I wanted to share with you today is the one on how I became a Franklin. It started back in 1960. A plane came from Fort Belknap, Montana, and landed in Carbondale, Illinois. There was a bright-eyed little brown boy who came walking down the stairs and looked around and saw the woman with her arms open. That was Paula. I really can't remember, but there was a brief moment of total happiness, safety, just a beautiful outlook. I ran over into those open arms, and I hung on tight, hoping that this woman was going to be my mother. She picked me up and held me, and I got a very, very wonderful feeling from her that it was going to be okay. And then the rest of the family, Tim and Richard, joined us, and I got a good feeling from the whole group. And then at that point, I didn't want to let go. I felt just a wonderful belonging. At that point, I turned around and said goodbye to a guardian who handled my case, Marguerite Sakinga. She was one who took me from the agency to the airport and made the final union between me and the Franklins. And to this day, I still say prayers in our native way, thanking that we were all brought together and we've been able to enjoy this life, thanks to Paula and her many, many skills of being able to reach out and affect people's life in a good way, in a gentle way, in a very wise way. I don't have any stories like my brother has, because I was, unfortunately, probably at the center of it all. I probably gave my mother a lot of white hairs, too. Anyway. So it's been an honor. It's been an adventure. Just all around life of love. And it was given to me by Paula, and excuse me. It was given to me by Paula, and it will always be mine and the family's. And it's hard, but that's one of the lessons she also taught the family, is that nothing ever lasts forever. And I believe it now. And all we can do is thank her in our different ways and carry on her lessons about life. Thank you very much for coming in.
I'm Jan Franklin Zandor, Paula's oldest child, and I really appreciate seeing everyone today. I've had a horrible year. I lost my best friend in December, and another friend, and now my mother. So bear with me. I connected with Paula when I was 4 years old on the basis of both of us were children of the World War II trauma that so many thousands of people were exposed to. Tim mentioned her early experience It was quite nightmarish. As you may remember from your world history, the British were not expecting France to fall. When that happened in 1940, in June, Paula and her mother and her siblings were vacationing on the south coast of France. And they heard sounds, and a neighbor came over and said, "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" Yeah. And they turned the radio on, and sure enough, the Blitzkrieg had taken over France. And that changed everybody's calculation, because England had no anti-aircraft. They had no defense. And for the next 9 months, actually more than 9 months, it was more like 10 months, they were subject to heavy bombing. There were 43,000 people killed in Britain by the B-2 rockets. So I review that just as a context for how 12-year-old Paula Franklin, then Paula Fowler, experienced her formative years, and seeing people with no legs, no arms, terribly, terribly injured. And getting out was equally traumatic because, of course, the waters around England were surrounded by German submarines. So the only way they could escape was to get across the Irish Sea, travel all the way across Ireland to Galway. And because Ireland was neutral, they were able to get a ship and get across the North Atlantic. And her description of that experience was just utter chaos. And the thing that saved them was this very creative idea. And I don't know whose it was, whether it was Alta or Jean or Paula or my grandmother, who was a brilliant woman. They decided to get all white luggage. And in those days, everybody's luggage was brown. So at each point in the trip, all the luggage was unloaded and piled in a giant mountain, and good luck finding your luggage. But theirs was all white, so they got all their luggage home. So you have to be creative even in the middle of a disaster. What I think that did for Paula was to force her to grow up at a very early age. And when she was 15, she was already ahead academically, so she was ready to go to college. And her father ordered her to go to Northwestern because that was his alma mater. I guess it was cheaper or something. And she got to Northwestern to find that in the middle of the war, they were still having panty raids and beer parties. And she was expecting to get to a place where people were going to be serious about what was going on. And so she started her college experience being profoundly alienated from the people around her who were partying like there was no war. I think that always affected her, that she had that perspective on the preciousness of life that other people, many other people didn't really carry around with them. And living with her with that perspective was somewhat challenging. We never took things very lightly in our household. It was not that we didn't laugh, so we had a lot of opportunities to do that. But Paula always took things very seriously, including her cooking. And she was famous for her rum-soaked fruitcake, which she always brought to our house in Michigan when they came for Christmas. So one time they arrived, and the car was just packed, as she always said, packed to the gills. And it was my father's job to pack the car. So he would was often forced to resort to very clever things to get everything in the car, the gifts, the food. So we're sitting at the table, and Paula is about to very seriously unveil the famous fruitcake. And she takes off the Tupperware, and suddenly she lets out a howl, a very angry howl, "Richard!" And my father, lacking enough room, had put something in with the fruitcake that he had picked up in Ohio. They had stopped to visit grandparents' home, and it was Granddad's moth-eaten wool swimming suit from the 1920s. Richard! And the rest of us were on the floor laughing. And she finally, I got with the joke, but humor was not always the first thing on her mind. But it was a good thing that we learned her seriousness, and we learned to make commitments and to value people, because you never know when they're going to disappear. And to see people for who they really are, not what you might assume at first glance. And all of us, I think I speak for my brothers, we were known for picking up some very odd friends and bringing them home. We adopted a lot of people. She was adamant that we learn to take care of our health. So it was up at 6 a.m. to exercise with Jack LaLanne on TV. And I think some people here remember Jack LaLanne, right? And she would always experiment with healthy food. Sometimes the results were not so great. But we all kind of tried not to make a bad face, hoping the next batch would be better. But there was always that time when you wanted to sneak out and get some French fries and some drippy, fat hamburger. And the biggest treat that I could even imagine as a kid with Paula was getting a Coca-Cola. Because there was never any pop or sugar allowed. And we learned from her also, don't expect to get anything unless you work your ass off for it. Okay, so there really wasn't an allowance. Okay, you had to do some stuff to be worthy of that. I had to make all my own clothes. There was not money to go out and buy clothes. Now the good part about that was that I got really good at it, and I made money for my first year of college entirely by making ball gowns for my fellow high school students to go to the senior prom. So it turned out to be a good asset. I didn't appreciate it at the time though. We learned from Paula there were no shortcuts in life. Don't ever try to cut anything short. She had tried to do that a couple of times and regretted it. There was the time when I was 4 or 5 years old, and she and my dad didn't particularly appreciate that they never had any time away from me. So they thought the best way to get me out of the house for a few hours was to send me to the local Baptist Sunday school. Until I came home preaching fire and brimstone and telling them they were going to go to hell because my father smoked and my mother had a little drink now and then. That was the end of the Baptist Sunday school. So, lessons, we learned a lot of lessons. I would have to say probably the hardest one was don't feel sorry for yourself. Get up and do something. There's always something you can do. And if you see an injustice, take action. And it was on that basis that she was perfectly happy to let me go to civil rights protests when I was 13 years old. John Lewis was my field supervisor. And I learned nonviolent protests. we desegregated a swimming pool in Southern Illinois, and we got beaten up by the KKK. I was a really big kid for my age, so they had a really hard time moving me when I went limp. That's a good skill. Paula was always brave. Even with the trauma and the terror in her growing up years, she was not afraid to take on some really taboo things. And, you know, it was no big deal for her. My best friend when we lived in New York was an African-American girl. We spent all our time together. I hung out in her neighborhood, which was not considered safe for white people. My parents said no concern at all. Paula wasn't afraid to take roles that other people were usually avoiding in the 50s, and particularly the role of an adopted mother to a child from another culture. That just wasn't done. Nobody did that. She held down a job and was the sole breadwinner when my father was getting his doctorate at Columbia. And she was out of the house an awful lot of the time. Now, she didn't make a lot of money, but it was more than a lot of our friends, because as you remember, the early 50s were the time of the McCarthy hearings and the blacklist. And I thought it was really cool that all of these people were coming to our house for dinner. And I later realized these were famous actors. They were all out of work and starving. And my parents were feeding, I swear, half the blacklist in New York City at the time. But Paula wasn't afraid to cook a meal for a famous actor if it made him, you know, be happy and productive for another day or so. And she lived in many communities that a lot of people in the middle class and upper middle class in this country would not have lived in, because they were depressed economies. That was the work that she was doing and my father was doing to help people organize. And we lived in New Mexico, very depressed economy. The mines had closed there. Southern Illinois, no more coal mines, nothing for people to do. Farming was not very productive. Morgantown, West Virginia, another coal mining state. And Baltimore in 1970, right after the rebellion and the fires. So she never had a really easy place to live. But every time she had to move to a new community, she figured out who were the cool people to hang out with, and she made friends. And of course, there was usually a Unitarian fellowship or church to connect to. And we learned a lot of lessons about flexibility from her. How to adapt, how to drop in, how to parachute in, and find out who's doing what and get connected. It was only a few days, and we'd be part of the community. So those were wonderful lessons learned from trauma, and that has been something that I've done professionally for a great part of my career, is to help other people with trauma. I've counseled rape victims. I've worked with veterans of war, and of course I've had to work at the political level as well, and all of the skills that she taught me have been absolutely essential and necessary. And I wanted to close with a short quote from one of the books that Paula and Dick published with their joint partnership. And it's significant that in this book, the authorship is Paula and Richard Franklin. So the order of names would have been very significant for my dad because he was a writer. And she did, I think, more than 2/3 of the work on this book. She did the data analysis, she did a lot of the writing. And I think it's just very, very interesting to see how the book is closed. When the two of us met in our youth of discontent a quarter of a century ago, our mutual consuming concern was the painful condition of men and their organizations. We grow older, the discontent lingers. Still, the 5 years in West Virginia had far-reaching impact in soothing our unease. We discovered not solutions to problems or answers to questions, but a process. We caught a peek at functional means leading toward more fulfilling human ends. National study groups or commissions have multiplied in recent years. Their reports testify to the same internal cancer. The U.S. has created an unequal society, demoralized and schizophrenic, a domestic time bomb ready to detonate, and boy are we seeing that now, a social habitat mocking our national ideals. This condition leads to questions like, how do people with social commitment originate change when they have only themselves, when they do not exercise the leverage of high political power or wealth? Where do groups begin to exert impact, to humanize our out-of-control culture? How can community action improve the quality of life while staying within the value frame of our national character? By self-renewal rather than by violence. Where to begin to help America become more congruent in its preachments and practices, using educational means in the long reach for human well-being? So I'll leave you with that question, which I think we're still all trying to answer. Thank you.
Paula actually listed the elements that she wanted in this service, including a number of hymns that were in the green supplement, which had been published to correct some of the mischaracterizations of humanity as only of the male gender. We're going to sing, many of them have been brought into our great hymnal, including the one we're going to sing right now, number 203, All Creatures of the Earth and Sky. Won't you rise as you are able and sing it with me?
Creatures of the earth and
remembrances from a few dear friends, Jane, Roger, and Carol. I'll invite them to come up, and I'm going to tell you, if you want to use a handrail, anyone who comes up to the stage, there's one right here. For some of us, I sometimes lose my balance when I'm going to the separate ones. So that's just a key for us. Jane, Roger, and Carol, would you come up? And we're going to have a moment afterward for people who have brief sharings that they want to share. We'll do that in a few minutes, but you can be listening to them and thinking of your own stories. You're welcome.
I have to say that I began thinking about what could I say about Paula or to Paula. And I then thought, I better write all those things down on a list. Then I said, well, I think I'll say what I want to say and get it in nice condition. And then I realized I'm no vision and I wouldn't be able to read a word of it. So then I sat in the pew there and thought, my goodness, there goes my first topic, there goes my second topic about Paula. And so we'll have a few words. I begin with Tim's wedding, when joined to the women of the family was Nancy, lovely, wonderful, a joy to be with, and just a calming, centering person that you want to talk with and be with. But before the wedding, Paula and I both came out of our apartments, fully dressed and ready to go. Paula was there with her big, rimmed, gorgeous hat and flowers, her chiffon dress flowing. Oh, I just ran up and said, Paula, you forgot your makeup. Then we moved right along to Edward's wedding, and showing just who she was, Paula at Edward's wedding gave an address talking about the Groveland Native Indians tribe and their symbol of the butterfly and what that meant to them. And we all acquired a new learning and a new love for Edward, as well as his tribal background. Now, how many more do I have to go down for? I guess I want to go right to the end and said that I am a resident of Broadmead, where Paula retired, and we did not think of her life as ended. We don't do that there. Our lives continue, and we just go to another phase. And everyone we try to include. So many people would go to visit Paula. Once one member of the staff went in and had some time and thought this would be a lovely way just to sit and talk with Paula. And they did exercises, and it was very invigorating for the staff. And she said, I'm going to come back again, Paula. Would that be all right? And Paula had a way of closing her lips and saying, yes. And then she said, oh, and we'll do the exercises, okay? No. Paula, everyone loved Paula. She had a smile all the time. And when I would go down to visit each time, she would stand up and she would look into your eye. and she would be searching. And so you in turn would search in her mind. And there was a meeting, and the meeting got dimmer as time went on, but it was always a search and always a love. And thank you. I forgot, there's a P.S. from Rodney. The day she died, Roger gave me a call early in the morning, early for me, and I got up and didn't know just what to do, but decided to walk over to Paula's room in the wing of the building. And I got there, and they were lined up on either side of the hallway, the staff, friends, the highest administration, the lowest people who scrubbed the floors and did the laundry were there. And I just joined them to be the honor guard for Paula. When they were finished doing what they do, and Paula had died, they opened her door, and everyone stood at perfect silence, at attention, and she was wheeled out with a lovely white tapestry quilt on top of her. And they took her down to the elevator. When she went down in the elevator, at the other end was another honor guard that took her right outside to the waiting hearse and said goodbye to her. So another way that we could all join in mentally and think of a very happy and honorable way to say goodnight.
I met Paula Franklin in the fall of 1965 at Carbondale, Illinois. I had the good fortune of having Dick Franklin, her husband, be my major professor during her master's degree. And I remember the first time I met Paula was at their Carbondale house. They were very gracious, inviting graduate students over, so they invited a couple of us over. And I'm in the kitchen getting a drink of water or something, and there were a few dishes in the sink. And Paula comes up beside me and she said, "You know, Roger, there are so many more interesting things in life than doing housework." My first Paulianism, you know. And we put it a number of different ways, but she could always take an event and somehow look at it positive. It just, those words always struck with me, and you know, there are so many others that like that. And she would always have that smile, that Paula smile. You know, I wouldn't call the Franklins hoarders, but they don't like to throw things away. And there's two or three different themes in that. And I'm going to take a little risk, but one was Paula's wardrobe, you know, and it came up again last night about the amount of jewelry she has. But it didn't make any difference what the occasion was. Paula would have something to wear. Now, you might, and I'm certainly not something that pays attention to the trends of dress and those kind of things. But you look at that dress and I'd say that's at least 20 years old. But yet, Paula was able to pull it off, to make it look very contemporary with her jewelry, a scarf. It just was amazing. The other thing about that trend of keeping things is I'll bet the three children have something very prominent in their house from the Carbondale house 50 years ago. If not, certainly from the Cloverdale house. So there is that trend. We don't get rid of anything because there always might be a use. But that trend of not giving anything away, when you walked into their house, there's a sense of security because you've been there before. It felt so homey, so stable, which is almost a contradiction, yet it isn't. Contradiction because they dealt with all change. Change was a theme that both went through certainly Dick's career and certainly Paula. But it was change out there. When you came into their house, it was stable, it was the same. And I think that you could just keep that theme throughout. Somebody asked me, actually it was Maddie, when she was about 9 years old. You probably don't remember this, but there was an event at the Franklin's house, and I was over at it, and after about 15 minutes, Maddie looked at me and she said, "Who are you?" Well, I'm not a blood relative, but I'm like an uncle that comes back in because I've been with the Franklins since 1965. First through a master's degree, and then as Dick was going to Morgantown, he said, "You know, Roger, they have jobs there. Why don't you apply?" So I was there the 5 years that Dick and Paula and the family were there. And then he moved to Johns Hopkins to Baltimore. At the same year, I moved to Columbia, Maryland. And then we moved into Baltimore, and I've ended up the last 15 years that Paula lived at Clover Hill, about 3 blocks from it. And then we lived at Broadmead the last 3 years. So it's like I know the family and I'm part of the family. I think there's probably some other things, but I think I've known 4 people with this kind of Alzheimer's, the awful disease it is. And yet, there's an essence about the people that they keep to the very end. And we've alluded to it a couple of times today. The big blue eyes staring at you, the smile, those kind of things. But with Paula, there was a fence that she could just perk up at. What is coming here? Tim often say, "Wow, was she the old Paula when she came into the sanctuary?" The other thing is, I remember her when Janie Missioner's wedding, about 7 years ago, I think. And I happened to be in State College visiting Tim and Nancy, and Paula was there, and she asked 15 times, once it was 15 or 20 times or maybe more, "Who's getting married again? Where are we going? Now, who is it?" And yet, when we arrived at the ceremony at Broadmead, Paula got up and gave a 2 or 3 minute, absolutely right spot on description of Jane and John's relationship. If you just say, "I thought that woman had Alzheimer's, what happened? Did they cure her?" Because she was so good at those moments, even at her 91st birthday, that again, it was just the 5 of us, Tim and Nancy, Sharon and myself, and Paula. And it was, I guess, February 2nd is her birthday, someplace in that area. We took her out to eat. Paula not only had a crab cake, she drank a beer about this high. She drank it every minute and smiled the whole time. So I think I'll just end there. But Paula really had a profound impact on me because she was always supporting, regardless of what I said or what I was going through. I could always depend on going to their house, having peanuts in the jar, funny, the little things you remember, and the great hospitality that Paula, and certainly Dick and Paula, and certainly Paula, after he passed on. So she will be missed, but she will be remembered.
So my name is Carol, and I'm going to one-up Roger here. known Paula, the Franklin family, since 1956. So, sorry, Roger. I cannot remember a time in my life when I did not know Paula. She's woven into fact of my life. I thought of her as my second mother, and I think she regarded me as her second daughter. Paula and my mom, who was also an Natalie, by the way, met standing in line for something at the university. And they got to talking, as one does in such a situation, and they discovered that Paula had a 16-month-old Tim, while Natalie had a 12-month-old me. And so from there, we progressed to weekly play dates. Both moms shared a lot of ideas, common ideas about how to raise kids. And one of them was that vigorous physical activity outdoors was a must. And we spent hours roaming our neighborhoods, climbing trees, doing all kinds of things. Every now and then, when it was raining, we had indoor activities. They also prized, the mothers, they also prized education and reading, literature, and so on. So there was a time when I think each of us was being read, or maybe one mom or the other read to us Peter Pan, because Tim and I and my older sister turned the sofa into Captain Hook's ship and had many adventures sailing the salty seas. Copper, who was a most excellent little dog, also figured in our adventures. So for play dates, we went to walks around Campus Lake. So it was, I'm gonna say, if you drive around, it's a 3-mile loop, but if you walk all in and out the fingers of the lake, it's, I'm sure, much further than that, but from a very early age, we all went around with 2 moms, and first the 3 kids, and then Edward joined us, and it was 4, and the little dog too, on these long walks. Our dads got along really well too, so we had family occasions. We had Thanksgivings together, we had hikes and picnics at Giant City State Park. Contrary to some of the remarks that have been made about her cooking, I remember fondly ice cream. The Franklins had a hand-crank ice cream machine. So on those hot July nights, we'd all take turns cranking the ice cream and, of course, enjoyed the results. So life moved along like that, all of our childish pursuits, until the year we were 11, 10, wasn't it? The Franklins moved in the summer. They moved to Morgantown, and we did not. And my mother had a firm belief that once someone would move, they were out of her life, so she didn't really keep up. But then I was accepted at Hopkins and moved to Baltimore, and we reconnected. I reconnected with the Franklin family. And again, we had Thanksgiving dinners and other occasions, and Tim would come home for summers, and he and my friends and his friends would do things out and about in Baltimore. And then there was a period after I graduated, there were periods of underemployment, unemployment, and through all of that, Paula was really supportive. We used to agonize for hours, for days. We'd have long discussions about why bosses behaved the way they did, and she had troubles. I think there was a period of time when she did not get her well-deserved promotion at Social Security, and she and I would talk about that a lot. And her, of course, her degree in psychology and her life experience helped so much for us to understand these things and deal with them as best we could. Then I joined the Foreign Service, and it wasn't really, yes, Tim's and Alta was also in the Foreign Service, but I'm not sure I really was following in her footsteps. I just decided it was what I wanted to do and had wanted to do for years. And I would come back periodically to Washington, and I'd make the pilgrimage to Baltimore for Thanksgiving dinner again, or other visits. I I used to go and visit Tim's Aunt Alta in Lexington, and I remember seeing Tim and Nancy and Trevor when he was born, and through the years, members of the Franklin family were always there and part of my life. As I think all of us have said, she was really a vibrant, beautiful, warm, caring person. And she would, if you asked, she would give you help and understanding. But it was on I would say, logical or rational basis. You had to be willing to figure out if you made a mistake, how it happened and how you could do better in the future. But all the same, very welcome. When I was accepted into the Foreign Service in 1988, she gave me, I think at Thanksgiving, a studio portrait of herself. And she was really, you could see it, you could see her spirit glowing out of the photograph. And she inscribed it to me on my accomplishment. And she added, if you need me, just let me know, and I will find a way to come visit you, and I will help you in any way I can. And she signed it. I love your signature. So, I won't say delighted, but I'm really happy to celebrate the extraordinary life and the extraordinary person that was Paula.
Sharon and Maddie, excuse me, you have readings for us. Sharon?
We now have a reading from the New Testament of the Holy Bible. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 51 to 57. Behold, I tell you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised imperishable, and we shall be changed. For this perishable body must put on the imperishable, and this mortal body must put on immortality. When the perishable puts on the imperishable, and the mortal puts on immortality, then shall come to pass the saying that is written, Death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting?
This is The Intimations of Immortality by William Wordsworth. What through the radiance, which was once so bright, be now forever taken from my sight. Though nothing can bring back the hour, the splendor in the grass, of glory in the flower, we will grieve not, rather find strength in what remains behind. In the primal sympathy, which having been must ever be, in the soothing thoughts that spring out of human suffering, in the faith that looks through death, and the years that bring the philosophic mind. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Judith Templeman and harmonious.
I'm going to speak a few words before I introduce the song that our group is going to sing. I've been a member here since the late 80s, and one of the ways I got connected was attending Paula's Dream Group on Sunday afternoon here. So we're talking a good many years, because that has continued changing its format for a while now, since time goes by, there was a core group of 3 women and Paula. We met in her home once a month or so. After she went on to State College, there would be a random call that one of the 3 local remaining gals would call up and say, I think we ought to get together and work on our dreams. And I swear to you, without saying it, we did it so that we would have Paula's presence again. Kind of like that circle of women with the space. She wasn't visible, but her presence was there. Now the song that we're going to sing is a contemporary piece composed by Milk in great use for all the women's marches in recent times for women's safety and women's rights. And I ask that we contribute that song that we worked up this spring, the Harmony Youth Group, because I knew that if Paula were still here physically, all the things that are represented by those activists and those gatherings and the singing of this song, she would be well connected and well focused on doing everything she can. So Paula, I think, is here with us as we sing this song, Quiet.
We have a few minutes if there are people who would like to share very briefly a word of testimony for Paula. I know a couple of people mentioned that they'd like to say something. Please come right up. And again, there's a rail here. If you'd like to get up the stairs, and if you can't get up the stairs, you can make other arrangements.
I'm Stuart Wolf. My mother, Jean, was Paula's younger sister. Not youngest, I'm sorry. And I have something actually that my father wrote. Summer 1948. Nantucket is a wonderful, little-known place to summer with interesting jobs and people along with endless sailing, swimming, biking. But it is still recovering from a century-long depression. Having completed my freshman year and realizing that I needed to earn more than 50 cents an hour island wage, I decided to seek my fortune in the New York market, but not without my beloved 19-foot sloop, Shady Lady. As I worked on the boat in the barnyard behind Mammo's house, her neighbor, Ann Mabel Perry, often stopped to chat on her daily preambulations to town. And one day she suggested that her niece, due to arrive the following day, might enjoy my project. Oh, dread. To my surprise and pleasure, Paula arrived the following day and took an immediate interest in the project and knew how to help. For the next week, joined by my old chum Harvey, we spent most of our time working on Shady Lady and building a pram dinghy for the trip. Both Harvey and I were immediately impressed with Paula's intellect and sense of humor. Though we rarely agreed on principles, the discussions were always interesting and thought-provoking. Her parting jibe as we finally sailed away was, "I'll read about you in the obituary column." We kept in touch loosely until she phoned one day to say she and her father were in New York and invited me to join their dinner. I was impressed with Paula, but Paul was in a class all by himself. We became close friends for the rest of his life, and I was honored to become a member of his family a few years later. The rest, as they say, is history. Being in-laws meant that Paula and I kept in close touch and continued our fun debates over the years. She never admitted that I had a heart, and I never credited her with common sense. But working together as executors at Ella's estate, we came to appreciate each other's skills to no one's surprise. Paula, I'm grateful to Aunt Mabel and happy to have had you as a beloved friend.
I've known Paula the whole 20 years that I've belonged to this church. She's been a very important part of my life in this church. And she and I formed half of the 21218 neighborhood circle back when we had an east and a west incarnation. And so we spent a lot of time together planning things, or sometimes when no one would show up, it would just be the two of us talking. I got to know her pretty well, and I heard some of her stories about how she put her family together, and I heard about her pregnancy losses. That's an important part of her story, and she shared that with me. And it was really important because between my two children, I had 3 pregnancy losses, and most of you who know me probably don't know that because I didn't talk about it. They were all before I was telling people I was pregnant. And she knew because I shared it with her. And the 3rd pregnancy loss was pretty devastating and needed to be operated on. And I shared with her what was going on, and she knew what to do. She went to the farmer's market that day, and she bought peaches, and she bought fresh vegetables, and she made peach cobbler, which I guess her relatives probably know her peach cobbler, and ratatouille. And she brought them over, she didn't want to interfere because she knew I was back from the hospital, and she just left them on the front porch. And then later in the day, she made a phone call and told us to open the door and find the food there so that we had something for dinner that night. And that always touched me because she knew what to do, and she was just there for me quietly. And I miss her terribly.
Number 4.
Paula was fearless, ferocious, amazing, and kind. So now I have to be fearless. I still miss you. You were there, back at the beginning. You were there, welcoming me in. You were there, encouraging me. Ever present, ever kind. So good, so gracious. Then, constant became sometimes. Sometimes became occasionally. Occasionally became. You became like a cloud after a storm, fading, fading. Then you were gone, gone with the morning mist. I still miss you. You were there back at the beginning, and then you weren't.
They followed each other around the country, New York, Carbondale, where I was born, where Paula held me like the second day I was in the world, and then back to Baltimore. So much time we all spent together, playing, getting in trouble. I think that we swapped parents at different times. You guys would go to my folks, I would go to your folks, you know, when we couldn't stand our own folks. Because we had difficult folks, both of us had difficult folks, or all of us did. And so when I came to Baltimore, when I came back to live as an adult in Baltimore, Paula's the reason I became Unitarian in the first place. And when I came here, she was here. And it was an amazing relationship, full of, I was in a very difficult place with my parents, and she stepped in, and she encouraged me and told me history I didn't know about my own family. Some of it surprising, but it was an amazing relationship that I had with her my whole life. And the thing that I always remember about her, especially as a kid, was her shoes and her lipstick. She always had the coolest shoes and the brightest lipstick, no matter what. And I'll always remember that.
So, I'm Alice Liam, and I remember when I met Paula. It was sometime about 1971 or something like that. And so I wanted to tell you a little bit about the Dream Group and how that was a thing that explained something about Paula. So she had made a speech about dreams, and I said, we should study that. And I didn't have time to right away, and so she, well, yeah. And so she brought it up later, and we got the dream group together. She picked the principles for the dream group from a Unitarian minister in California named Jeremy Taylor. There are a number of ways of working with dreams, one of which is people tell you what it means. You can buy dream groups that tell you what your dream. None of that. You are the only person who can say what your dream means. You tell us the dream, and then it's kind of out there for everybody, and the person who has the dream also cannot tell you as a listener what that dream means to you. So it is a thing where you do your own opening of the door to spiritual understanding, and it really is a way of opening the door, and Paula was a principal at doing that kind of thing, and being able to open these things for people and allow them to do their own determination. And she was very determined about that. And we also laughed about it a lot. One time we had one of Judy's dreams, and we laughed so hard. They came and asked us in the kitchen if we were okay. And this dream group continues in a modified form, occasionally meeting. People are here. We'll meet again soon. Paula's legacy continues in a changed form. I think probably 200 people from this church at some point or other came to the dream group, told a dream, it answered a need for them, and then they didn't come back anymore because it had done its thing. And that continues. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Scott McLeod. I've been a participant in this congregation for the past 25 years or so, and will say that I feel really privileged and honored to have known what I consider the greatest generation of this congregation, many of whom have moved along to greener pastures now. But I still look around on Sunday morning and see them with us and where they sat, and they'll always be with me here. I just want to say, first off, to Tim and to Edward and to Jan, thank you so much for such a rich, giving us such a rich perspective on the tapestry of your mother's life. It was really just a really full overview of her life, and I feel like I learned so much about her and about your family. So thank you for that. There's one moment, one time, I will always, when I recall Paula, I'll always think of this one moment in the life of this congregation. And it was about somewhere 15, actually there's somebody who can answer this question in the back, exactly what year that might have been. But it was a time of doom and gloom for our congregation. We were in the midst of the annual meeting. There was not nearly enough money to cover the dreams and aspirations of the congregation at the time. And everyone was just sunken. It was like a cloud just hung over the annual meeting. And Paula, in her grace and wisdom, recognized a moment of opportunity that apparently she alone could provide at that time. And she sat and she listened, and when it came her time to speak, she took the microphone. And so the great debate was that there had been a longing to reinvigorate the religious education program in the congregation. And she stood up and said, well, I will put up the seed money. I will make a donation in this amount. I don't remember the exact amount. And I challenged the congregation to join me, meet my donation. And So this has become a long story. So it transformed. It was an absolute transformational moment in the perspective, the vision of the congregation, and I really think she did that spontaneously. It really just came out of her grace and sharing the wealth and blessings of her life, that she saw that in that moment, she saw the opportunity to transform our perspective and our work going forward. And indeed, within just several months after that, Becky, sitting in the congregation, we had a religious education director in this church, and it was just her incredible foresight to see that opportunity and grasp it. So I just wanted to share that with you.
My name is Mary Rose Weller, and I wanted to speak just very briefly because nobody's highlighted the way that I know Paula, which is through the poetry groups and the reading groups that she hosted. And she was involved with in Social Security, and then she hosted at her house very graciously for years and years and years till she moved to State College. And that's certainly not as grand a thing as what people have spoken about, other things people have spoken about here. But it was important to me, as a way of knowing her, and I think it was important to the other people who came to the group as well. So I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you, Paula. Thank you for doing this.
Try and keep it short, but I'm Tori Franklin, I'm her grandchild, so I got a little bit of a different experience, I guess, than a lot of people have spoken. And I just wanted to say, a few things that I admire tremendously about her, as well as a few things I'll miss tremendously as well. She did a great job establishing new traditions. When we would take visits to Baltimore from Virginia, she would always stay up and wait and greet us when we got there. My grandfather did as well. I have less memory of that because he passed when I was very young. And then, in the mornings, when we would always wake up, she would always make a run to the local bagel shop. And she would get us chocolate chip bagels, which was very important for all three of us grandchildren. So that was, she did many things that, Jan spoke on it earlier about how she did a great job of being a first mover, breaking down barriers with regards to women in the workplace and that sort of thing. But she also did a great job of, establishing traditions, with the Dream Group, with family traditions that we still partake in, with Christmas, how we go about the morning. Her and my dad always having coffee in the morning, before we wake up. Those were all things that traditions that she helped establish. So those are things that I'll miss tremendously about her, because she was such a great, she was a great leader, really. She was fearless. She set the tone. She was not scared of anybody or anything, and that helped, rub off on me, and I know my father, and my aunt and uncle, and our family. So, and it was very important for her to allow or to aid her grandchildren in learning about the world. She helped. We went on a trip to France with her. We stayed at a really nice place in a small town in France, which always have fond memories of. She took my sister and I out to Oregon to visit my uncle Edward, which was a great experience. I believe my brother was going on college visits, so they were doing that. And my sister and I got the chance to go out to Oregon and experience a lot. I got to learn a lot from her about her nuclear, her children, and kind of what the Franklin family was like before the grandchildren arrived. So those were all very important things that she taught, and she was just really a really great woman. She, like Jan said, she never judged a book by its cover, but she always presented herself well, so that if somebody did want to judge her by the cover, they would get a good impression. I've tried to take on that motto, I guess. So she's going to be dearly missed. There's some of my most vivid memories growing up involve her. So she's, I could go on for days with stories. Even into her Alzheimer's years, she still had plenty of spunk. So, I'm just blessed and thankful to have known her and to have gotten to be a part of the family. Thank you.
We will, in just a couple of minutes, be heading over to Enoch Parish Hall, and I imagine the stories will go on and maybe all day. But we have one special.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Natalie McGregor. I met Paula Franklin in 2014. I didn't start working with her right away because I was going on vacation in Jamaica. I'm from Jamaica. And when I came back, I had the privilege of working with her, and we became very close. And when I wasn't working with her, because I have two positions in my job. I'm a GNA, and I also give medicine. And when I'm not around, people would be scared because Natalie was coming to check to make sure her grandmother, they would say Natalie grandmother, and if things wasn't right, I would make sure that she's okay. Tim and I would message each other on the things that she wanted, and I made sure that she was well taken care of. I remember one day she didn't want to go to the beauty shop, so I went in and I said, Paula, are you going to the beauty shop? She looked at me, she said, no. I told the nurse, Paula don't want to go to the beauty shop, so I tried, and in another 20 minutes I went back. I said, Paula, are you going to the beauty shop today? She's like, no. So, people with dementia or Alzheimer's, you can use a family member and say, Tim, so I would say, Tim wants you to go to the beauty shop. She looked at me, she said, no. She said, Tim, didn't choose me, I chose him. I was like, excuse me. He had a lot of beautiful, some people see that having dementia and Alzheimer's is very sad, but as a caregiver, it gives me great pleasure taking care of these people because it takes time, it takes a lot of patience, it takes love, and if you don't have patience and time, don't go into it because in the end it was hard some days, but because of the love that I have for my job and I love her so much, I miss her. It's like it has never been the same since she has gone. But I'm hanging in there. I have a beautiful grandmother, a beautiful friend. I've never ever taken care of a patient that I've truly came to love. And she always been there.
I'm Chris Wolf. I'm just going to say a few words from the perspective of being a nephew. I'll say it from my brothers, Stuart, Andrew, my sister Sarah, who's going to be here. Tim, Nancy, Jane, Jan, Edward. All I can really say is that you're truly blessed to have been fortunate enough to have an aunt like Paula. Growing up, you don't realize this, but as you become an adult and you become more mentally acute and able to engage with her at a level which is really her own, you become to appreciate her more and more. And over the years, I know each of us have had our opportunities to spend time with her. For myself, visits to Lexington and going on our long morning walks together were always physically invigorating and mentally invigorating. And what I will just say is that, as a person that I've known and a person that I've gotten to have discussions with, your mother was like no one else. The impact that she has on your thoughts, your ability to share ideas that she may not agree with you on, and have a deep discussion with and a deep debate, were truly remarkable and educational and fulfilling. And you just move forward in your life knowing that she's touched so many, obviously, but she's touched us all. And I just want to say thank you.
Let's be in the spirit of prayer. Without whom no person has ever seen, yet who at every time and in every place in the human family has revealed herself in the love found in families, birthed and built, in the growing sense of purpose in the world, in joy and friendship, in our dreams and in the mystery, in our relationships and in the simple fact of human love. Reveal yourself to us today in these remembrances of our sister Paula. Make real to us in this moment of shock and silence her deep love for us. Let us feel once again our love for her. May eternal and all-conquering love guide us in this moment to see more truly where it is we are and intuit where we are going. Let us be a people, a family, with one another, leaning on each other to help Paula move from this time and place to the eternal place, the eternal time, the season of good memory, the place of wonder, awe, and mystery. That time and place that are our destiny too. O thou whom no person has ever seen, give this family strength in their pain. Reduce their sadness and increase their joy, that love might guide their hearts and minds and their dreaming. In the name of all that is holy. Amen. Trevor, will you come in?
This is another reading from the prophet. Farewell to you and the youth I have spent with you. It was but yesterday we met in a dream. You have sung to me in my aloneness, and I, of your longings, have built a tower in the sky. But now our sleep is fled, and our dream is over, and it is no longer dawn. The noontide is upon us, and our half-waking has turned to fuller day, and we must part. If in the twilight of memory we should meet once more, we shall speak again together, and you shall sing to me a deeper song. And if our hands should meet in another dream, we shall build another tower in the sky.
I'm actually going to invite us to extinguish the chalice before we sing the finals. Nancy, would you please? May I share these words? Unitarian Universalist poet Mary Oliver writes these words: to live in this world, you must be able to do three things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it, and when the time comes to let it go, to let it go.
May the extraordinary spirit of Paula remain in our hearts and continue to inspire our lives. Amen.
The body of our sister Paula, recently filled with life, will in death be given into the compassionate hands of earth, affirming the ancient truth: ashes to ashes, dust to dust. The Jewish scriptures and Pete Seeger speak to us: for everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born, and a time to die. Let those who have known the death of mother, grandmother, and friend, all who have witnessed this time to die, discover in the hours and days ahead hearts open to comprehending compassion, minds which make sense of the painful events which comprise the circles of life and love, spirits strengthened by that which inspired Paula in her living, and may something new be born in us. That our love for Paula will never die. That our love for Paula never die. Blessed be. Amen. Will you join me in singing Blue Boat Home in the Teal hymnal, number 1064?